Kurt, we are in the midst of what has been, for me, a roller coaster of a first round of playoffs. I mean, everything that I thought was going to happen didn't happen. People got injured. I mean, but before we get there, how are you doing? Because right now, I need some help. I need some help.
Yeah, I hear spring has hit New York City. Everything's pretty good on my end. We are. Hey, look, it's playoff basketball. I spent a lot of the last weekend at the Staples Center, including 14 hours on Saturday. But that's the fun time. This is when the games matter and there's intensity and all the media are there. It's not just the local guys, but national guys are dropping in. So this is the fun time of year.
When you're watching, the crazy thing to me is that we're still watching history be made by LeBron, like his first 2020 game. And like to think that there are still firsts out there for LeBron after his storied career is actually pretty amazing. What was that atmosphere like at Staples in the playoffs? Can you just paint a picture for me?
Well, for the Lakers in particular, who, by the time the Clippers got back home and they were without Paul George, they were without Paul George, but then without Kawhi Leonard by game 3. Look, they played hard. We'll talk more about them down the line, but like the energy had been sucked out of the building because everybody kind of knew where things were headed. Then the Lakers come in, and you kind of forget it's their first home playoff game in front of a full crowd in a decade because they won the title in the bubble. They had some playoff games the next year, but that was still post-COVID, a third of the crowd, half crowd, like they couldn't fill the building. So it wasn't the same energy. The energy was off the charts. And then, like you said, LeBron and Anthony Davis feed off this. Austin Reeves is having a great time. But the way LeBron, at the end of the day, we're like, oh, this is going to be Anthony Davis's team. He's got to play well. Monday night, when they have to get a win, it's LeBron James driving right. The best shot blocker in the game's coming over to swat that ball into the third row. And he takes it, off the top of the glass, basically, and down in his performance. That 2020 game was just otherworldly on Monday night. It was an otherworldly game for anybody, let alone a guy in season 20.
I know that's the thing that's really amazing to me about the playoffs is that yes, playoffs are all about matchups. So anyone at home taking notes, that's the number one thing that's important: matchups. Because you got to beat the team 4 times. But then at a certain point, after the first couple of games, and plus you've seen this team throughout the season, right? But then after a certain point, like players got to play. You realize, what they're going to do. The adjustments. The counters to the counters, right? And there's no more new wrinkles, regardless of what Coach Ty Lue was saying with the wrinkles, right? There's like no more new wrinkles you could do at Game 5 or Game 6 in the NBA playoffs. At a certain point, your players have to take over. And LeBron, that's why it's like the most fun to watch playoff basketball, because at that critical moment, you find out who the stars are.
Yeah, and by the way, among the stars, as great as LeBron has played, as great as we'll talk about Jalen Brunson. The best player in the postseason has been Jimmy bleeping Butler. Butler has been unbelievable.
He has been. Because remember this, let's just back up really quick. This Heat team all season long, 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. We didn't know but we knew the core of the Heat team was there. We knew the DNA championship culture was there. So we weren't necessarily concerned about the composition of the Heat, but we were worried about execution. Oladipo goes down again. Really, first of all, wow. Kurt, his career has been just sidelined over and over and over again. So my heart goes out to him.
I felt so bad. You could see, by the way, do you see the reaction of the team? Like they knew it was bad, and they're like heads in the towels down about this because they love that guy.
Yeah, so to see that and then to bounce back the way they have, I know Giannis missed some time because of the bruise or the sprain right in his back. He had that back issue, but still, to be the number 1 seed, you have to take care of business. The fact that the Miami Heat chose now. And let's even go back a little further. Remember the Bulls series? You said like that matchup against the Chicago Bulls. They've had the number all year long.
Well, but the Bulls were up in the fourth quarter by double digits, and the Heat have this playoff gear that they get into, right? Like they just can find one more gear, and sometimes it's Jimmy Butler going off for 56, but Kyle Lowry has had big games in the postseason, and Duncan Robinson is coming out. Duncan Robinson, who was lost all year, is come out of the wilderness and is draining threes again. Like, it's amazing how that team came together.
And they did the same thing on this one too. Down double digits, fourth quarter.
Yep.
Jimmy Butler just goes on a tear. And so I think, and I also forgot to mention, so in addition to Oladipo going down, Tyler Hero out, with a broken hand through the finals. So now we're thinking, okay, like even if best case scenario, this team should not be where they are, right? It's just impossible for them to be able to be in a position to take out Giannis and company. That to me was like, that's Herculean, this effort. Once again, is it sustainable? Let's not talk about that question. I don't think it's necessarily sustainable, but man, they proved me wrong in the play-in. They proved me wrong in the first round. So hats off to Miami.
Yeah, and I think though they've got to win one of the next two. They do not want to get into a game 7.
Oh yeah, no way.
Back in Milwaukee. So
no, yeah, I think right now you're absolutely right, Kurt. I think, but the way this series has gone, to come out of a 3-1 hole like that, I just think it's very unlikely for Milwaukee.
It is, and I think those 3-1 holes. I think same for the Grizzlies. I just don't know how they, especially with, again, we could talk about it. If they had Steven Adams in this series, I'd feel differently. But they can't stop the Lakers inside right now. The other 3-1 series, though, the New York Knicks. Producer Dan is on cloud 9, man.
Yeah. This is also shocking to me. Because on paper, we talk about this all season long. On paper, this is why they have to play the game. Vegas is, up in arms, I suppose. I don't know. But on paper, the Cleveland Cavaliers are a better team, in my mind. And on paper,
absolutely,
they should be. This should not be possible. And yet, those, by the way, Kurt, I don't know if you know this about me. I love words. My 2 favorite words in the English language, and yet. Because despite everything, despite all those, advantages, here we are. The impossible happened, and the Knicks are about to close at the Cavs. Is this a new era in New York?
I think it's the start of something. Ultimately, I think they're one superstar away from truly contending. But what they've done this series, first off, I kept saying going into the series, the Cavaliers would win because they have the best player in the series. They have Donovan Mitchell. I don't even think he's even been the best player on his own team. I've been a little disappointed. Donovan Mitchell, and by the way, he can do it. We're talking about Jimmy Butler's 56, and everybody's like putting up the graphic of guys who have scored 56 or more in the playoffs.
Yeah, Donovan
Mitchell's on that list.
He's
he's capable of it. He hasn't this series. He has really struggled. Jalen Brunson, this is the second year in a row. He's just outplayed Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs, just flat out outplayed him. But the other thing I thought, man, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley up front are going to dominate. They are going to control the paint. The Cavaliers are going to have the inside game. Mitchell Robinson has outplayed both of them. And I think this gets to the heart of what, if I were a Cavs fan, would bother me. They're getting outworked. The Knicks are flat out playing a little bit smarter, but a whole lot harder. They're just maybe we see that finally. We're recording this just before the game 5. Maybe back home with their season on the line, we get a desperate Cavaliers team. But they just haven't felt. The Knicks have played with genuine urgency every night, and I haven't felt that from the Cavs.
Yeah, I think my assessment on Donovan Mitchell is I agree. Before this series, I told you, Kurt, I was like, I know he can do it, but you got to prove it. To me, if you want to be a guy who scores, he scored 71 points in a game, and all this stuff, and you want to be one of the franchise guys and be a legitimate star and take this Cavaliers team to the next level. You got to prove it when it matters, and he wasn't able to do that in Utah, and now clearly not able to do it in this series. So that to me has been very disappointing. Obviously, it's early in his tenure in Cleveland, but still, I think the rest of the team, I agree with you. I was expecting more. I was expecting more of a not necessarily a fight, but just kind of more maturity. And I think we're just seeing that Cleveland's young, and it's just like, and it's not like New York's much older. I want to make sure that's very clear. It's not like New York's much older, but the way they play, and especially with their experience last year, it just seems like this New York team They knew what they had. They went to the playoffs, got a taste of that, and then they added in Jalen Brunson, who took them to another level. I agree with you. I don't think they're at contender level yet, but you're talking winning a playoff series or two consistently in New York City. That is a huge improvement. And I think it goes back to Leon Rose and them actually thinking, let's build something. And then once we get to a level of like we're consistently winning one or two playoff series, now it's the time to get someone of like a Kevin Durant caliber, like someone like a superstar, or you get through the draft. But like but in my mind, like that is kind of the way to go. Is you build it first, and then you bring in someone via free agency.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who they get, but they are well positioned to go after that person in terms of draft picks, in terms of players. Quickly status is a lot higher now. You might be able to move him. So it's, they'll get there. But if you're Dan and or any other Knicks fan, you're suddenly looking at the road ahead and thinking, well, now we don't have to face Milwaukee.
Yeah,
we're going to get Miami. And suddenly in their minds, and Jimmy Butler might have other thoughts here, their minds like, we're suddenly in the conference finals. And hey, did you watch the last 3 minutes of that Celtics falling apart? Like Knicks fans are already like way down the road.
Yeah, slow down, New York.
By the way, Corey, did you watch Trae Young and the last few minutes of that Celtics game?
Once again, shocking. Oh, this first round, that's the only word I could think of. Because I mean, we know how good the Celtics team is. We know, and to think they've been there, they've done that. You have one of the best 3-point shooters in the game right now. This is what he makes his money off of, being clutch. He even has a celebration. Like it's like him and Damian Lillard both have like this is like what they do, right?
Yeah.
And to think that you would allow him to get that opportunity to get that shot off at that moment and extend the series, to me that showed a lack of that killer instinct from Boston, which I was not expecting. I was not expecting. Going to the end of that fourth quarter, I was like, okay, this is wrapped up, done and dusted.
I thought all game long to a degree, they just kind of, I'm going to get this quote right, unlike Doc Rivers. They played with their food. They just kind of messed around with it, and they didn't finish it, right? They didn't go out there and just like, hey, let's get up by 30 and just make this thing over. They kind of played around, and they got in trouble for it. And then they really, as much as Trae Young's shot was incredible, and I don't want to take anything away from the effort the Hawks put out. The turnovers, the sloppy play by Boston, the defensive miscues down the stretch were kind of stunning. And then, like you said, they're going into that last play. I'm going to do what the Warriors did and we'll talk about that series in a second, what the Warriors did with De'Aaron Fox, final play, like the last game. You don't get to take that shot.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Draymond and Steph are going to crowd you as high as we can. Harrison Barnes gets a clean look at a 3, and they'll live with that because you can't let De'Aaron Fox take that shot. Well, you can't let Trae Young take that shot. If Clint Capella beats you, Clint Capella beats you. Don't let Trae Young take the shot.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, even with Minnesota, it was the same kind of concept. It was the last play. Anthony Edwards, I don't really think it was a very clean look. But I will say there's this that game, Alexander Walker, all game long, like he's been hitting clutch shots over and over and over again. And I was thinking, if I was in the huddle drawing this up, I have one shot coming out of a timeout to win it. We need a 3. Like what worked like a couple possessions before? Anthony Edwards driving, suck up, all the attention in the paint, and find the outlet guy, which is Alexander Walker in the corner, knock down the 3. We saw that happen like over and over and over again, and it extended the life and against the Denver Nuggets. And then what did they do? They completely went away from that. And I was thinking, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like you have 3 seconds, you can catch, dribble, pass. Shoot, you have plenty of time. But whatever, it's. But anyways, yeah, you're right. The last second shot. I mean, it's like you could kind of go over and over in your mind and pick that apart and kill yourself trying to figure out all the what ifs. Oh, my goodness.
Minnesota becomes, to me, one of the more interesting off seasons, just because what's become obvious over the course of the season, and then especially, I think the playoffs sometimes just crystallize what we know about a team, and I think it did with them. This is Anthony Edwards' team.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, and now you've got to start figuring out how you work around that. And it's led to, we'll save the trade speculation for another day, but it's led to a lot of people around the league wondering if they've got to trade Karl-Anthony Towns because they can't trade Rudy Gobert. Like and so now you're stuck. So how do you make this work? It's just led to a lot of speculation. We'll see what direction they go, but you're building this thing around Edwards now. You have to.
But you got to be
Denver.
Careful, you got to be careful though, because I think Anthony Edwards is still. I mean, remember after the shot, he just went straight into the locker room.
Yeah.
Like it didn't. I mean, no sportsmanship. No. Like I mean, I understand you just got eliminated, but so in my mind. One thing that I would be very wary of as an NBA franchise, and we've seen this over and over again, particularly in Atlanta with Trae Young, is if you build a team around a very, very young superstar, give him the reins too early, you end up having a volatile, emotional team. So I understand the desire to maybe keep Karl-Anthony Towns a little longer because he's been through the ringer a little bit. He's experienced kind of the whole media gauntlet. And he's older in the NBA, as far as franchise superstars are concerned. So for him to kind of like bring Anthony Edwards along just a couple more years before them giving the reins to him, I think would be a wise decision. Because right now, the way I do think Edwards is starting to become more stable, but he's still like an unstable electron to me. He kind of like buzzes around and he makes incredible plays, 16 in the first half, and then like goes quiet in the second. Like emotional here, stable there. Like I need a more stoic overall kind of consistent performance from him before I give him the reins.
By the way, the other thing out of that, Denver looks maybe the best team in the West right now.
Denver looks really good. I mean, everyone's stepping up, Kurt. Like Michael Porter Jr., like he hits shots when you need him. Nothing all game long. Fourth quarter, I'll give you what you need. Obviously, with Jokic, it's unbelievable. Jamal Murray hitting that next level that we know he can do it, and now he's showing it. I really like Denver.
Denver's healthy. But I think the other thing that was impressive about this first round, they won the non-Jokic minutes. When he was off the court, and I didn't factor in the last game, but going into that game, through the first 4 games, they were plus 27 in the minutes Jokic was off the floor, and that was always their death, right? Like they were up 13 in the minutes he played, and in the 9 minutes he sat today, they were minus 18 and lost the game. If they can consistently win or break even in the non-Jokic minutes, they might be the best team in the West.
But what do you think about the Warriors and Kings, though? I'm curious about this. We mentioned it briefly.
Yeah, that's the best series in going right now, isn't it? To me, it is because they're just so even. And look, it's 2-2, and there's a bunch of Warriors fans out there like, oh, if Andrew Wiggins had hit that shot in game 1, that 3 late in game 1, we'd be up 3-1 in this series. And then there's Kings fans like, if Harrison Barnes knocks down that, which would have been poetic, if Harrison Barnes knocks down that 3 at the end of game 4, we're up 3-1. Like this series is so evenly matched. I just hope, and I think this is the big question now, isn't it? I hope De'Aaron Fox can play through the finger. That's
finger. Yeah, he said he's gonna play, but we all know about.
It's for the medical fans out there. It's an avulsion fracture, which is something. It just means that when the muscle pulled away from the bone a little bit, it took a little bit of bone with him. With it, it's something. It's painful, but it's something like Kobe and others have played through. Now, Kobe's probably a bad example because Kobe would have played through a torn Achilles for a minute if he could have. But it's a question of touch on his shot, of handles. Is that all the same? Because he's been so good this series, and they have done a good job with Draymond Green and Kevon Looney of keeping Sabonis in check. And Sabonis has, I think, got to find a way to get some space and step up and carry a little more load, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying, Kurt. It's just like this is my question. This was my question with the Kings all season long: is when you get to this moment, can you be consistent at a high level over and over and over again against these teams like the Warriors who have championship DNA and they know what it takes? Although I do think the Warriors have lost a step. It's clear, I think. But Steph Curry's still Steph Curry, and he's still in his early 30s. And they know what it takes to get there. And the problem with the Kings is, I remember there was a Mike Brown was talking to his guys in the huddle one time, and it's like, it's on us. Like, we get to decide if we want to win or lose, And those are conversations that would never happen on the Warriors bench because they know, like they know what it's like to play basketball. So I think that was my biggest thing. So when you have adversity like this, there's a, like a little left turn that you didn't expect. Oh, dead end on that road. We got to find another way to get to the destination. One of your best players is scratch your finger.
Yeah.
Can this Kings team respond? And in the playoff atmosphere, I don't know. I don't think so.
We'll see. They've impressed me through 2 games. And
I think they're really good stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, I'm like, you don't want to give the Warriors hope.
No, that's the risk. And as much as look, they almost won game 1 on the road, and they're the Warriors. We haven't seen a big Klay Thompson game yet, right? Like there's weapons still out there for them. What? It's
coming. That's the thing about the Warriors, that I know they have bullets in the chambers. Like I know that they have extra bullets coming. And the Kings, I just don't know if they shot all the bullets early, I just don't know. And so that's the thing about playoff basketball to me. I'm like, well, do you still have extra ammo?
All right. One other playoff question. You impressed with the Philadelphia 76ers, or did they just take care of business against a lesser team?
I'm impressed with them, yeah, because I think ultimately, talk about playing with your food. I think the 76ers can be guilty of that at times, right? Like they have so much talent. To me, just take care of business, move on, give your guys time to rest, So the fact that they were able to do that, and remember this Nets team mid-season, I know they made some changes all over the place actually, but this young team, like they had Bridges and Johnson, they kind of brought a little bit of swagger, and we've seen them upset, different teams throughout the season. So for them to just say, hey, none of that is happening, we're the top dogs. I thought that was very mature, and I have not used the word mature and Philadelphia in the same sentence in NBA talk forever. So
yeah, exactly. And by the way, nobody might have been happier with Trae Young's game winner than Joel Embiid, who gets a couple more days to rest his sprained knee until he has to get back out there. So he'll take all the extra days he can get. There's all the long breaks he can get with this, just trying to get back. Because let's be honest, assuming they go up against Boston, which I think is safe, they're going to need MVP Joel Embiid to survive that. He can't be 85% of Joel Embiid.
Yeah, certainly.
So I think it's time we moved on to Corey's Jukebox this week. Where are we going, Corey?
We're going down to Mexico. Well, I guess technically it's Texas, but
they're adjacent.
Yeah, I'm bringing in the king of country music, George Strait. So I want to talk about Kawhi Leonard, and I want to be very. So I don't know if you love country music. I just now started to really appreciate country music because I believe it's the rom-com genre of music. It's like the rom-com of music. It plays in every scenario, and it's the whole spectrum of human emotion. So I have really enjoyed listening to George Strait. There's a song called the Seashores of Old Mexico, and it talks about this guy who's running from the law in Tucson, goes down to Mexico, and goes on all these adventures and stuff. And I do feel like that is a little bit of Kawhi Leonard here. I do feel like that because Kawhi, man, every single time we know what he can do. He's a Hall of Famer. He's unbelievable. He's one of the best players I've ever seen at the NBA. He is undoubtedly a game changer. However, his time in LA has been such where I feel like it's almost like running away from the law a little bit. Conversations of load management, conversations of, do you really want to play? His coach has to defend his desire to play. And then, this is even the conversation, remember in San Antonio when he was sitting out. So this is not a new conversation. And then even the way he left Toronto was like, why did he leave? And then so this has kind of been like a recurring thing the past few years. I feel like he's kind of been, I don't want to say an outlaw, but I do feel like, close to like an outlaw in basketball terms. And right now getting injured with the meniscus again, and who knows how long he's going to be out, and we know he's not going to rush back, given his medical history and given what he's done in the past. He's going to take his sweet time. I feel like this is going to be another issue where it's like, where is Kawhi? I think he's laying low until everything blows over in Mexico. It's unclear.
I would just say the song kind of covers the guy just basically. Basically,
like, hey, I'm in trouble with the law in Tucson, so he's like, I'm just going to go over to the seashores of old Mexico until this all blows over.
It's interesting, and I think part of Kurt's Corner, I wanted to talk about the Clippers as I posted about them this morning at NBCSports.com. There was whispers Ty Lue wanted out. Somebody asked him directly at the end of his press conference, and he said, "Yes, sir, I'll be back." Basically, was the response. So he wants to be back. Russell Westbrook wants to be back, but they are a team where that new CBA really starts to impact. They and the Warriors can't live the way they've been living, right? Like they can't live $40 million. The Clipper payroll next year is on pace to be the highest in NBA history at well over $200 million. If they can't live there because all the restrictions on team building, you lose your mid-levels, you can't use the buyout market, you can't trade certain picks. There's a whole range of restrictions that start to phase in over a couple of years. But I think I guess then that's where I am with Kawhi and the Clippers, Corey. If you're Steve Ballmer, so you're a little more money than you have right now. If you're Steve Ballmer, do you run it back? Or do you decide it's time to change course?
No. I think I always, advocate for patience because it's so rare in sports. And I think that the Clippers, to their credit, they've shown tremendous patience, right? I mean, they paid a ton of money to these guys. They built out a roster. And I thought they did a pretty good job of putting together a supporting cast. It's not like, it's not like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George didn't have a team,
No.
So like I think they did a very good job of giving them every resource, except for a brand new stadium, right? Every resource,
which is coming.
But every resource they need to be successful, and once again, back to those two words, my favorite words: every resource available, and yet this has been the result. Completely lackluster for not 1 year, not 2 years. I mean, years. This is like since like 3+ years now, 4 years. I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, I mean, and this is like in sports terms. 4 years is like dog years. That's like 20-something years. That's a lifetime.
Yeah.
So I think it's time to walk away and just say, let's just cut our losses. We gave it a real shot. Like no one can say that, the Clippers didn't give them every opportunity to be successful. This is on Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, certainly.
I'll tell you, Corey, talking to people around the league, the expectation is they're going to run it back. And I asked, the funny thing is, then Kawhi Leonard and Paul George both have one fully guaranteed year, then player options after this year. So they're extension eligible. And I asked somebody who worked for a team, like, well, would you extend him? Would you extend Kawhi Leonard? And the response was, yeah, probably I'd add a year because the potential is so great that I would do it.
So
and I'm like, really? You would pay him and you'd basically guarantee the player option year and add a third year to that? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I was stunned. But I'm telling you that seems to be the thinking. So
I know, but like I said, I think I disagree. Generally speaking, I come from the San Antonio Spurs, idea of school of thought. And I understand that, the older I get, I just realize how rare that Spurs kind of like alignment was and the Spurs, ethos was. And then I think that's also one of the reasons why they were so dominant for so long. And I also realize now as I get older why so many teams make so many mistakes, because there's just so much temptation. And I think really like he's so good. But look at the past 4 years, like you have to move on. Like and he just got injured again. You might be bankrolling just another year of rehab. To me, this doesn't make any sense. I disagree with the vast majority of professionals in this game. In that sense.
I'm kind of with you on this one. I would look at the future and think if you start now and you're opening your new building in the fall of 25, you can have a really good team by then. You can morph this into some other very good version of itself. So you're opening your building with a good team, but we'll see.
But before we go there, I think I want to just mention this. I do think there is some memory here that is haunting the Clippers, because remember the way that they moved on from Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin.
Yeah.
I do think there is this element of like, if we can just hold it together a little longer, what if? So I do think that there is that still in people's minds, but I disagree. I disagree. I think they should move on.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to bring up in Kurt's corner for sure is Corey, and I know you and I are uncomfortable talking about this to a degree, but the officiating has become it kind of always becomes a topic during the playoffs. But this year in particular, with the ejection and suspension of Draymond Green, with I've written more euphemisms for the word groin than I've had to pull up a thesaurus of euphemisms for the number of shots there this year, and ejections. And it's I think what bothers was a couple things that bother players, but one of them in particular is just I kind of agree with on this. It feels like the league and the refs have been inconsistent as to what's the line on a technical, what's the line on a flagrant, what's gets you ejected and what doesn't. There's some stuff that's clear. DeJounte Murray deserved to be suspended. You can't, I don't care how frustrated you are, and I thought he had some valid points about conversations with referees and not having interaction with them. You can't bump the guy and yell at him. You just can't, right? But is it just me that feels like the line isn't steady this year?
No, I don't think it's just you. But I will say, we have this conversation, like you said, it seems like in the playoffs, you never want the officiating to determine the outcome of the game, right? Yeah. I think that's kind of the crux of the argument here. You want players to decide. And it doesn't necessarily feel like, in this instance that the players are deciding the games because, DeJounte Murray's not out there or Draymond Green isn't out there. So I do see what you're saying there. But I do think we kind of forget quite often, like last year was so long ago, we're like, oh, I forgot about those calls or I forgot about that, the way they called that game. So I do want to give the referees a little bit of grace in that regard.
I look, it is. Well, I think professional sports in general, but basketball in particular, I think it's really hard to referee these incredible athletes moving at this incredible pace and what's clean and what's not. This was true it's true in football. If what's a pass interference way downfield when you're running at full speed is not always. Sometimes it's really obvious, and sometimes it's not, right?
Yeah, I think the NBA.
Of course, you would have caught all the passes had they not interfered with you. Let's be clear. But in general,
Kurt, I think the NBA will probably. I feel like though. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So moving into the second round and beyond, do you think they'll overcorrect? What do you think the reaction from the league office?
I think you get less. You weed out. Fewer games, fewer officials. So you're getting in theory the best of the officials, which always freaks fans out because they're like, well, that means more Scott Foster. But yes, more Scott Foster, more of the guys who grade out well. But I think you get these more veteran officials that tend to draw the line more consistently and also allow, which this was something DeJounte Murray's, I'd be curious what you thought about this. I thought his point was this referee won't talk to me. I've gone up to him and tried to say politely, like, hey, how do we have this conversation? How do I, what was I called for? How do I avoid doing this in the future? How do my teammates and I do this? And they get a lot of like, I'm not talking to you about this. And finding the referees who can have that dialogue, I think helps to a degree, who can define what they're seeing and admit that sometimes they missed what they saw, right? Like what you thought you saw wasn't reality. But I think you get better at that, you go along. So I don't think there's going to be an overcorrection. I think, though, the deeper you go in the playoffs, Corey, the more they let them play, the more physical it's allowed to be.
Yeah. And I think there are some voices lobbying, right? I think didn't Coach Doc Rivers talk about, the star players being tested more because, other players, like it's more retaliatory, and so I do think that's an interesting argument. But from my perspective, like if you're a star player, you have to, I think, yes, you protect your star players because they're the things that, they're the people that sell tickets and the deals. But I do think you also realize that it's unlikely that you're going to get benefit of the doubt in the playoffs. I remember, well, I'm not going to give any examples, but it's just kind of, I think that's kind of like just part of being a star player. And I'll give you an interesting kind of, I remember when Jokic, he had that triple double, right? The finish, because I just watched the game last night. It's my mind. When he had that triple double, I think he only made 8 shots. and he had
got the
27.
line.
He had like a 30-point triple double. Only made 8 shots. He shot like upwards of 30, right? But you think, well, doing the math, how did he get that many points? It's like, well, he went to the free throw line a ton of times, right? So I can understand, like, if you're looking at a championship caliber team and you want Jamal Murray to have, 16 in the first half and Michael Porter Jr. to have double digits and Jokic to have a 30-point triple double, it's not all going to be necessarily shots. Someone's going to have to go to the line, and Jokic is going to have to get those calls. So I do think I could understand the star player's frustration in that regard. But I think at the same time, it's like, hey, look, you're Jokic, you're back-to-back MVP, you're not going to get that call. You're just not. You have to play through it.
No, those star players also tend to. I mean, Giannis goes to the line a lot because Giannis plays downhill and makes you foul him. And Jokic does that. Embiid does that. LeBron does that. Obviously James Harden has a long history of that. Like, there's certain guys who are just very good at drawing fouls, and you've got to be more it's easy for us to sit here and say this. You just have to be more disciplined against them, but at the end of the day, they're going to get to the line.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on flagrants, but I think you might be onto something, Kurt, where I think, as we move on, it may not necessarily need to be a statement or need like a real adjustment. I think it kind of figure itself out from the league's perspective.
No, I mean, people are going to complain about the officials, but people are always going to complain about the officials.
So I'm curious, though, because, in Kurt's corner, you want to talk about some of the awards. We saw some that were pretty obvious. We knew Paolo Banchero was going to win Rookie of the Year. That was not a surprise. We know Lauri Markkanen going to win Most Improved Player. That was pretty, straight on. Malcolm Brogdon, sixth man. I'd be curious, what were some of the awards that stood out to you?
The only one I was really curious about was Defensive Player of the Year and how other people approach this. I had, for the record, Jaren Jackson Jr. number 1. He goes on to win it. Brook Lopez 2, and then I had Draymond Green 3rd on my ballot. There's other guys who could have gone there, but Draymond, as bad bad for them, like as mediocre as the Warriors defense was, I think if you watched them, you saw how important Draymond was, and I think that's been really evident in the postseason. Like, he's still an elite defensive player. But I thought that was the one where I didn't know what the outcome would be, because it was a more philosophical debate of Jaren Jackson Jr. has been great, but has he played enough games? But it went to Jaren. So did any of them stand out to you? Did anything catch you off guard?
No, you and I talked about maybe like, what does the clutch award mean? So, but it makes sense that I think once having defined that, it goes to De'Aaron Fox, right? So, but I mean, that was like a weird, you and I were like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, I think it's like we said, I think there'll be some real debates about that in the future, but
but I mean, so that one was kind of interesting to me, but the other ones were all pretty straightforward, I thought.
Yeah, I wasn't really taken aback. The MVP is coming. That whenever they announce it, what I'm most curious, I think Embiid's going to win it. What I'm most curious about is how close those top 3 are, like how many people voted for each and what order it was in. I'm wondering if the consensus settled on Embiid and he's going to win by more than we expect.
I'm Team Jokic on this one.
We'll see where it lands. Last year was so incredibly close between the 3 of them. We'll see if it does that again. That's kind of one of the ones I'm curious about. And then there's always a fight over all NBA and those stuff because
that's gonna be interesting. Okay, so now let's go to the Mad Libs segment. We always like to end our conversation with something that our producer Dan kind of concocts in his chamber. I don't know. He comes up with these ideas, these questions. So this one is, if you had an adventure buddy, which I think can be loosely described as if you were to go on a quest, something like Lord of the Rings or like The Hobbit. I think it's one of those type of like you travel all of old Earth, Middle Earth, or whatever, whichever Earth we're on, and then you have like a companion that helps you solve things, riddles, crimes. Like I have no idea. The hero's journey. What would be your animal companion, Kurt?
If I can have a fictional one, I'll take Baloo from. Go to Disney and just like. Would he be functional? I mean, I suppose he'd help with some stuff, but I would have fun hanging out with Baloo. Baloo would just be like hanging out with fun time guy. I mean, in a practical sense, maybe I'd like a chimpanzee can fight and is more human like and can probably help on some things. Plus, I'd never have lice on me, which would be great. But I'm not sure. But if I can pick a fictional character, I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to take Baloo. What about you? What would be your
question? Yeah, I don't really know what quest I'm going on, but I feel like it'd be pretty dangerous. I feel like it's like the underlying premise of a quest. So I feel like there'd be a lot of danger. So I'm going to bring in one of the world's most like dangerous animals, because like if I'm rolling with a hippo, nothing's going to mess with me. Hippos, I didn't understand how crazy hippos are, Kurt. Like, do you understand like how fast they are?
I've seen the documentaries. Like they can cover a lot of ground really short period of time, and they're kind of nasty.
No, they're like super nasty. Yeah, I mean they can like, so unbelievable jaw strength. If you're looking at the specs, like the trading card of a hippo, like unbelievable jaw strength. Like one of the world's most dangerous animals, and not only dangerous in the water, can swim super fast, but can run like 30, 40 miles per hour, something crazy. And like they're huge, they're massive, and their skin is like basically like a tank. So for me, I feel like I would bring a hippo with me, because then I'd be good, be semi-aquatic. Like what if the quest has some like island water sea component, and then what if it has some like on land component? I'm good. I feel like with the hippo, and if I get a really big hippo, if we want to go into like the mythical element of like imaginary animals, like dragon territory and such, phoenix territory, I could ride this hippo as well, so I wouldn't have to.
Oh yeah, there you go.
I would, it'd be like a boat, and it'd be like a steed. So I feel like the hippo would be the one.
Wow, that's a great call. And so
yeah, so look at it. Yeah, we just got confirmed. Hippos can reach up to 30 miles per hour. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah,
I mean, I could go through like like suburban neighborhoods on my hippo and be good. Like there's no.
You're ready for The Last of Us, man. You're just gonna run through all of those.
Oh man, Kurt, I can't wait to talk to you again, because you know what that means. We'll be into the second round, and it's going to be absolutely bedlam. This first round has me shook. That people have come to play in the playoffs.
Remember when we thought the East was going to be the normal one? We knew what was going to happen.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's why I love playoff basketball. They have to play the games. Kurt, I'll see you next week.
Looking forward to it.